Good morning, good evening, whichever time zone you are in. Welcome to Breakthrough APAC briefing on unlocking business growth in Confucian influenced Asian market. And I am Portia Shira, and I work as a business development associate and outreach associate in Breakthrough Global. And today with us, we have Dr. Bart Sayle, our founder, and Charibelle, our APAC director. So before we start, of course, I'll be hosting the briefing today. A few ground rules. Please refrain from using your electronic devices unless until, of course, it's urgent. And if you have any questions at any point, just drop them at the Q&A section and we're gonna get back to you at the very end of our briefing. So without any further ado, I'm gonna let our speakers take the floor now.
Thank you, Parsha. Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Charibelle, and I lead the APAC headquarters for Breakthrough Global. Now, as the head of the APAC headquarters, I actually bring a little over 20 years of experience working across large multinational companies and local companies in Asia, spanning various industries. And throughout my career, I've had the privilege of witnessing firsthand the dynamic business landscape in this region. So today I'm very excited to share the nuances of the workplace culture here in Asia, drawing from my own observations and experiences. And throughout our discussion, I will be joined by Dr. Bart, a renowned expert in business growth and cultural transformation. Dr. Bart?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Charibelle. I'm so inspired about this because there's some nice connections in history. So I started Breakthrough, I founded Breakthrough 30 years ago. So we're in our 30th year, which is an incredible feeling considering going back to when I started. But when I started, I'd just come from the corporate world and I'd spent many years in the corporate world. And my sort of last several years were with Unilever. And in Unilever, that's where I designed Breakthrough. I designed Breakthrough for that company, and we ran the first Breakthrough programs within Unilever. But the very first Breakthrough program was in the APAC region. So this is sort of coming home in a sense. And we ran the first one in Australia, and it was a great success. And then we rolled it out. We rolled it out through, well, New Zealand and Australia were combined. Then we rolled it out through Malaysia, through Thailand, through Taiwan. China wasn't available at the time, but we've been there since. In fact, we were one of the first companies to be brought into P&G China to actually do Breakthrough on their company. And that again was very successful. So I love the region. I'd done a lot of traveling anyway before that in that region, and we've recently opened our office there. We're lucky to have Charibelle, and we're looking to great things in the future with Breakthrough APAC. So Charibelle.
Thanks, Dr. Bart. So today is all about driving growth in Asian companies while respecting cultural nuances. We will delve into specific Confucian values and explore how they influence ways of working across Asian markets. We will examine the potential conflict between Confucian values on one hand and modern business practices on the other hand. And ultimately, we will discuss strategies or practical tips on how business leaders like yourself can find the delicate balance in driving growth, finding this synergy between tradition and progress in today's corporate world. And as we do so, we'll actually give you a little preview of some of our proprietary breakthrough tools and concepts, and also review some of the topics or content that we may have shared across our platforms, which you may have missed. So let's jump right in. Let's take confusion out of Confucianism. What is Confucianism? So Confucianism, some people think about it as a religion, but we can say it's a way of life that was propagated by a man named Confucius in the 6th to 5th century BCE, or before Common Era. And Dr. Bart, did you know that actually we're a few days away from Confucius' birthday, from his recorded birth date, which is September 28th. So it's actually honoring Confucianism during Confucius' birthday. So it's perfect time to do this today.
Perfect. I'll make a note of that.
So happy birthday to Confucius. Now, some of you might have heard of Confucianism. Some of you might have been more familiar with Neo-Confucianism. We will not delve into the specifics of this versus that, but suffice it to hear that Confucianism existed alongside Buddhism and Taoism for several centuries as one of the most important Chinese religions. Now, at a much later period, during the Song Dynasty, the influence of Buddhism and Taoism brought about Neo-Confucianism. So Neo-Confucianism is like a combination of ideas from all three. And in essence, Neo-Confucianism maintained many of the core values of classical Confucianism, but it reinterpreted or expanded upon them, integrating metaphysical concepts or a deeper focus on personal morality and cultivation. Now, what are these core values of Confucianism? The first one is filial piety, or reverence for family. In Confucian thought, the family is the basic unit of society, and its stability is paramount. So filial piety emphasizes the respect and duty that children owe to their parents, their ancestors, and extended family. And by maintaining a harmonious family relationship, individuals can cultivate virtues that can be extended to the broader society. There is also the core value of loyalty, particularly in the context of one's role or position. It is a foundational concept of Confucianism. Whether it's the loyalty of a subject to a ruler, an employee to an employer, or a friend to a friend, it's this unwavering dedication which ensures social harmony and order. Because for Confucius, your integrity as a person was deeply tied to fulfilling one's duties loyally. Next, there's respect for authority. Confucianism places great importance on the respect for established hierarchies, be they familial, social, or political. This respect for authority ensures anything but the most important thing is social stability. When everyone understands and accepts their role within the hierarchy, society can function harmoniously. So it's not just about obedience, but also about the leaders themselves behaving in a way that deserves respect through virtuous conduct. Education is another core value. Confucianism views education as a pathway to virtue. So it's the primary means by which individuals can better themselves, achieve moral refinement, and by extension, again, improve society. Knowledge isn't just about intellectual growth, it's deeply tied to character development. So as an educated person, you need to understand and embody virtue. And last but not the least is hard work. Within the Confucian framework, hard work is not just an economic necessity, but it's a moral imperative. It's believed that through diligence, persistence, dedication to one's tasks, an individual not only upholds their responsibilities to society, but cultivates their character. So hard work is a reflection of one's commitment to the greater good, a means to self-improvement, and a path to achieving a harmonious life. No room for laziness or idleness. These are seen as disruption to the social fabric. Now, as China established itself as a dominant political and cultural force in East Asia, its philosophies began to influence its neighbors. So as you can see in the map, for Korea, which is very near China, the scholars brought back texts and ideas about Confucianism. Vietnam, being directly south of China, absorbed Chinese cultural and philosophical influences. And in a later period in Japan, the Confucian texts and ideas were actively incorporated into Japanese governance, ethics, and education. Now, Confucianism also spread into the other parts of Asia, primarily through Chinese migrants. And it left varying imprints on the cultures that you see even today across these markets. For instance, when it comes to the Confucian belief of the importance of maintaining interpersonal harmony and societal balance. In Indonesia, silaturahmi is a deeply ingrained cultural practice of nurturing and maintaining social bonds, often through regular visits, gatherings, or communications. In fact, in the modern Indonesian corporate landscape, the concept of silaturahmi is not merely seen as a cultural practice, it's a strategic initiative. Meanwhile, in Thailand, while Kongdi primarily finds its roots in Buddhism, it is a form of earning merit or merit making. So for example, a business person might go the extra mile to honor the commitments to a long-standing partner, even if it's not the most profitable option, because they view it as a way to earn Kongdi or uphold the Confucian value of loyalty and aligning again with the principle of harmonious living. When it comes to the Confucian belief of collective good or mutual aid, which are paramount to societal progress, there is a concept in Indonesia called gotong royong. Now, although gotong royong is primarily based on Indonesia's native communal values, both gotong royong and Confucian ideals prioritize the welfare of the group over the individual, emphasizing the importance of social cohesion. So in a modern business context, gotong royong can manifest as companies emphasizing team projects, collaborative decision-making, or pooling resources for communal benefits. For instance, businesses in a local area might collaborate on neighborhood improvements for the community outreach, embodying the spirit of gotong royong in their joint efforts for the greater good. When it comes to the Confucian belief of emphasis on moral obligation or the principle of reciprocity, there is a term in Malaysia called budi, which is closely tied to the idea of reciprocity, which is also similar to what we have in the Philippines, which we call utang na loob. And literally, it's when someone does a favor for you, there is an ingrained moral obligation to return the kindness. It's not necessarily as a direct payback, but it's more as a perpetuation of goodwill. So for instance, one example of this in a corporate world is when an employer might sponsor an employee's higher education. And last but not the least, there is when it comes to the Confucian value of hard work, which I mentioned earlier, hard work, diligence, or striving for success. Now, I live in Singapore. I often hear this term kiasu. And kiasu is a Hokkien term commonly used in Singapore and Malaysia, which directly translates to afraid to lose. Now, while it may be popularly used and directed at a person who has very strong drive for achievement and behaves competitively, either to attain their goal or to get ahead of others, it's the kiasu spirit, which drives people to strive for the best and not settle for mediocrity. So let's now go deeper into one of the Confucian values, respect for hierarchy and authority. The principle of respect for hierarchy and authority is often demonstrated through the use of formal titles and honorifics. And I'm sure for many of you who work with Asian companies or are working in Asian companies, you are very familiar with formal titles and honorifics. So let's think about honorifics in two ways. There are verbal honorifics and non-verbal, as you see in the slide. Let's talk about verbal honorifics. Verbal honorifics play an essential role in showing respect to superiors and acknowledging their authority. For example, superiors are addressed with their last name, followed by honorifics such as san in Japan or nim in Korea. Or in Thailand, you would hear the word kun used before the first and last name when addressing someone formally. And interestingly, there are many Asian cultures that also have specific honorific terms that are used to address those in higher positions. For example, in Japan, titles such as busho, which means department head, or shacho, which means company president, might be used. Now, when it comes to nonverbal honorifics, we are all quite familiar with a visual on the screen. You see these very commonly in movies that portray business settings in Asia. Bowing is a very common nonverbal gesture of respect in many Asian countries influenced by Confucianism. And employees may bow when greeting or showing respect to their superiors or authority figures. And Bart, did you notice that the depth and the duration of the bow may vary based on the position and authority of the person being respected?
I didn't know that, but I can imagine that definitely. Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's
So
the rule.
I bow to you.
There's a 15, 30, 45-degree angle to it, depending on the seniority of the person that you're greeting. It's very interesting. And over in Thailand, we know that the Thai greeting, which is the Huai, where you press your palms together and bow your head slightly. And again, the height of the hand and the depth of the bow depend on the age or status of the person you're greeting. Now, another example or demonstration of the respect for hierarchy and authority in Asia is really more about hierarchical org structures, which are a defining feature of many Asian companies. In Japan, for instance, companies like Toyota and Sony are known for their rigid hierarchical structures. And this structure isn't mere formality, but it's really a reflection of Confucian values that stress respect for elders and superiors. In fact, there's a cultural norm of senpai kohai, where senior managers or senior employees are expected to mentor and guide their junior colleagues in Japan. And over in South Korea, the large family-run business or conglomerates like Samsung and Hyundai, which are known in Korea as Jebul, they exhibit these values also, emphasizing a top-down approach in decision-making. Now, one of the most tangible imprints of Confucianism that endures today on modern business is the seniority-based wage and promotion system seen across East Asia, so Japan, Korea, or China. In Japan, the Nenkozuretsu, I hope I pronounced that correctly. So the Nenkozuretsu system at companies like Honda ensures that promotions and raises are tied to tenure, valuing the loyalty and experience of the employees. And the same is true for South Korea's Jebuls, where in LG, they often prioritize age or service length in their hierarchies. Now, let's contrast the key points regarding respect for hierarchy and authority on one hand, and the modern business practice of meritocracy and performance-based rewards. The Confucian value of respect for hierarchy and authority places significance on age, status, and position within the hierarchy. Decisions are often made at top levels and flow downward following the chain of command. However, this emphasis on hierarchy may inadvertently stifle innovation by discouraging contributions from those in lower positions. In contrast, a meritocracy and performance-based reward system allows for a fair assessment of employees' capabilities. It encourages rewarding individuals based on their demonstrated ability, regardless of their rank or position in the hierarchy. This approach fosters innovation by recognizing and promoting talented individuals throughout the organization. However, it is essential to align the meritocratic approach with the company's cultural values, because if not, conflicts may arise as different cultural perspectives and values may clash. Now, today, organizations face the challenge of achieving this balance between respect for authority and rewards based on merit and performance. This balance can be quite tricky to achieve, but it is crucial to promote a healthy workplace culture that values both tradition and progress. And here are our tips and some breakthrough tools and concepts relevant to achieving this balance. First, avoiding potential for overlooking talent or stifling voices from lower hierarchical levels. So this could be done through organizing forums where employees from lower levels are allowed to share their ideas, and that can easily be done. But I think this boils down to actually more of an open communication channel, sharing of ideas to tap into the potential of every employee. Dr. Bart, would you like to share something about how can business leaders enhance this communication through constructive feedback?
Absolutely. So this is great. And I think a couple of things to say now is, well, first of all, if any of you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll get around to answering them in the end, at the end of the briefing. But coming back to this, there's always a tension within cultures and organization cultures, and one of the tensions is that with every culture I've looked at in terms of organizations, whether it's based on Confucianism or not, there's always a tension between hierarchy and what I would call what's called here meritocracy, or an egalitarian. So in any given company, you can usually see 4, if you like, cultural archetypes. One of them is hierarchical, another one is egalitarian, a third is entrepreneurial, and a fourth is sort of the rest, fatalist, people who believe they don't have a lot of power within the organization, and so on. So these tensions are going on all the time, and any given company that we work with, we see that the center of gravity moves depending on what type of corporate culture it has and what its DNA has been. So within that, looking at this tension, the thing to do to release innovation is to really have what we call a healthy communication flow. And a healthy communication flow is one where people feel that they can basically say what they want to say what they believe, and so on, and there won't be any type of punishment for that. So I think, and I know that within our audience now, I think all of you are leaders. It's a real important role of the leader to be able to lead that, role model that, give examples of that, and certainly reinforce that free, healthy communication. And a big part of that is feedback. So some of our clients, after they've done a program, one of the things that they do is they really see the power of feedback. And some it's because they haven't seen how powerful it's been. They haven't really noticed it. With others, it's that feedback has been stifled. In an organization, unless you leaders are encouraging feedback, people may believe that feedback isn't allowed, particularly about things that that are seen as bad news and so on. So again, if you're a leader out there, your ability to encourage feedback by giving feedback, but more importantly as a leader, by taking feedback, is instrumental in you shifting your culture, even though some of its basis and its core values may be based in things like Confucianism and so on, to actually put another layer of culture on top of that, what I call the performance culture, which values feedback, where open communication is encouraged, where people will bring you both good news and bad news, which you can then work on to really help the organization grow. And feedback is a key way of you growing, your people growing, and your organization growing. Charibelle?
I completely agree, Dr. Bart. And actually, you mentioned the word innovation earlier on. And that brings us to our second point, where one of the strategies or practical tips that leaders can do is really finding that balance between traditional respect for authority and the need for innovation through a structured approach. But when it comes to driving innovation, I really think this goes beyond just establishing processes for brainstorming. Our firm belief is that all employees, regardless of the level, can contribute to innovative ideas. Now, Dr. Bart, what do you think about this one? Are all people really innovative?
Well, everybody is creative. Even if you believe you're not, you are creative, but that belief that you're not may stifle your creativity. I mean, you only have to go back to children. Many of you have children, and those that don't, you've been children. And how creative are children? I mean, that's part of their role, isn't it? Their job to be creative. And in being creative, break through rules and break through barriers and break through boundaries. That's what parenting is. It's being able to get the right balance, and it's a big theme, isn't it, with what we're talking about, balance and harmony. Get the right balance between allowing a child to break through some of those barriers to grow, but also keeping them safe. And when we come to an organization, I mean, you know, a great example is a client we worked with several years ago. And all of you would know this client. You've probably used their products. But they were founded by an individual who was still in the company, in his 80s at that time. And when you talked about respect and respect for authority, that was ingrained in this organization because he was the founder and he was still there. And the company was run as a family, even though it is probably one of the biggest companies in the world. It was still run on sort of family principles. And while that was wonderful and people really felt that they belonged in that organization with those deep family values, it also created a lot of rules, and not so much the written rules, the unwritten rules that were just assumed without being tested. And what we found working with them pretty quickly is that one of the unwritten rules is that all innovation needs to be done by the founder. And there were reasons for this, because at the time, the sort of 6 pillar categories, each of those categories was based on an innovative idea that he had in starting the company and running the company. So, there was a lot of belief around what he could do. But what it did is it stifled innovation, because people felt that they couldn't innovate, and that if they did innovate, then they would be breaking the rules, or they would be an outcast, or it wouldn't look good for them. And so when we started the program, we realized we need to unleash all of that creativity that's being stifled at the moment. And one of our principles and one of our tools is what we call the 1 degree shift. And the 1 degree shift is it's really about ideas and innovation. So people often go for the big idea. And I remember when I was at Unilever, I was director of innovation, and every now and then we would get an assignment. We need a big idea. And that's a pretty disempowering assignment to get. It's rather like an author or a writer who now has to write their next bestseller, and all they've got is just blank paper, thinking, I've got to write a bestseller. So one of the insights I had at that time is that, no, we don't need a big idea. We need a big result. And actually, a big result can come from many small ideas that work like a chain reaction. So from that, we built this principle of the 1 degree shift, that don't just look for the big idea. If one comes along, that's great. You should use it. But in the meantime, look at some of the smaller ideas that if integrated with other things will create a chain reaction that eventually will create a big result, will take you to a different place. So we brought that principle into this company, and immediately, overnight, people realized, so this is a way we can innovate, because we've been thinking that innovation is all about big ideas, and big ideas belong to our founder because he's got a great success record on that. But there's lots of small ideas that can lead to big results. And off they went. And it was a shift in the energy of the company, a shift in its innovation capacity, and really a shift in people's enjoyment and fulfillment in their role, that they could now use their creativity to actually shape things, shift things, and move things on.
Dr. Bart, we've spoken a lot about innovation. Now, I wanted to shift it a little bit more towards decision making, which is a very controversial or provocative topic, especially when we speak of the large businesses, family-owned businesses in Asia that you see in Japan, Korea, or even Thailand, where decision making is usually from the top. And in my experience, these kinds of companies have started opening up more, establishing centers of excellence to invite a little bit more of new ideas and potentially share decision-making, not necessarily from the leaders or the founders themselves, but spreading it across the organization. But how can we handle this decision-making in organizations in Asia where you have a very strong leader who thinks, no, even if there are centers of excellence, I need to make the final say, or they might perceive it as something like a threat?
Yeah, you could change that leader. But I think the thing is, I think, you know, we are now moving into a new world, really, of business leadership. And I think, and some people will be still in the old model of leadership, but the new model of leadership really is about, if we think around decision making, it's to use the power of your whole team in making decisions. I know, again, another example with a business that we worked with. It was a new CEO, and the previous CEO had made every decision in the company, even down to like packaging decisions in one of their companies in another country. It all went funneled through. For a start, the complexity of an organization these days, you can't handle those sorts of decisions, one person. But then if we look at if you like, if it's a culture based on that, then that's where the breakthrough needs to be made. And again, I'll come back to leadership's responsibility to do this. And if you're leading teams, which I think you all are, again, it's about allowing other people to make decisions, and even allowing people to make decisions that actually turn out to be wrong. Because I think that there's a sort of decision-making muscle that we have. And if you are used to making decisions and you make a mistake, then you'll quickly make a decision to put it right, because you've got the decision-making muscle. You're skillful now at making decisions. Doesn't mean you're skillful at always making the right decision, but you are skillful about when a decision needs to be made and making a decision. Because if you can do that and you get that muscle going, any mistaken decisions can be redecided, if you like. The most dangerous thing is when people can't make decisions, and it takes them a long time to make a decision, and there's a lot of emotion tied up and a lot of fear in making that decision. And so what happens then, if they make the wrong decision, then they're frozen. and they don't re-establish, well, I need to make a new decision. I need to put it right. They're frozen. And I've seen a lot of this, that sort of frozen, because they're not used to making decisions. So as a leader, get your team to make decisions. Now, we have a model for decision making, and we don't have much time, but very quickly, it's about your direct reports. So if you're working with your direct reports, what you do, you work with them to show them that there's 4 types of decision. So if I'm working with a direct report, the first type of decision, it's my decision and I own it. Yeah. The second type of decision is, it's my decision, but I want your input. And I might not agree with your input. I might not use your input. I might use your input, but it's my decision with your input, and I own the decision. The third type of decision is, you as my direct report, this is your decision. You don't need my input, but you own that decision. And then the fourth type of decision is, it's your decision, you own it, but you need to take my input before you make it. And I think that very simple fourfold framework really starts to loosen things up. It gives people responsibility. The other thing about a decision is that not only do you own the decision, you need to own the consequences as well. And this nurturing of decision making, along with feedback, will lead to a very powerful system in your organization. So I invite you all to start using that with your direct reports.
Wow, Bart, I wish we had a slide or a visual for the decision framework that you were talking about, but thank you for sharing.
We can follow up with them.
Yeah,
we can
definitely.
follow up with them.
We'll move on to the next Confucian value, which is the importance of relationships and social harmony. Now, let's delve into the influence of this Confucian value in modern Asian business culture. The first, as you can see in the picture, starts with after-work gatherings. And let's look at an example from Japan. In Japan, it's customary for colleagues to engage in nomikai, or after-work drinking parties. Because these gatherings provide a platform for team members to not just build stronger bonds or enhance camaraderie, but it nurtures a sense of belonging. In South Korea, it's common for co-workers to go for huishik, or company dinners, after work. Now, another key aspect or demonstration of this Confucian value in Asia is the use of business gifts. Now, let's turn our attention to China. In Chinese business culture, the exchange of gifts, known as liwu, holds great significance. Gifts are given not only during initial meetings, but also to celebrate partnerships and mark special occasions. This practice serves as a gesture of respect and goodwill, strengthening relationships and fostering harmony. In my experience, here in Singapore, every Lunar New Year, so one of the hallmarks of Chinese culture and gift giving, not just from businesses to consumer, but also business to business, is the Lunar New Year. And in fact, different companies here come out with their red packets. A Louis Vuitton or the nearby mom and pop will come out with their own branded red packets. And this really is, again, an example of the Confucian value of how to maintain relationships from business to business. Now, the most interesting topic about this Confucian value and its impact on modern business culture is really in terms of conflict avoidance. This is highly valued in many Asian countries. Now, earlier I mentioned the term kiasu for Singapore and Malaysia. There is also a term called kiasi, which is widely used across Hokkien-speaking people in Singapore, Malaysia, and Taiwan. And it literally means afraid of death. But it describes the attitude of being overly afraid or timid, being cautious or wary of disrupting harmony. So this cultural norm encourages individuals to approach disagreements with tact, diplomacy, and a focus on finding common ground, thereby maintaining social harmony and productive working relationships. In Thailand, in fact, if you get into a heated discussion, you have to maintain a calm demeanor and you have to avoid direct confrontation. So usually people often repeat this phrase, "Jayen Jayen" or "Jayen Yen," which is actually an effort to cool down hot hearts. Now, let's go into the conflict of this Confucian value of relationships and social harmony with the modern business practice of individualism and competition. In Confucian practice, relationships and social harmony are of utmost importance. The emphasis is placed on collective well-being, reaching a consensus, maintaining social equilibrium, or what we commonly know as "let's not rock the boat." So decision-making processes revolve around achieving consensus rather than resorting to confrontation. Additionally, relationship-based business practices, particularly with suppliers, hold significant weight where trust and long-term partnerships are highly valued. On the other hand, modern business practices often revolve around individualism and competition. So the focus is on personal achievement, standing out from peers, continually outperforming others. This perspective encourages innovation, but it can lead, or it may lead to fostering internal rivalry or a cutthroat environment within organizations. And competition here is not just limited to internal, but also extends to business partners. So you create a very competitive dynamic in the market. Now, achieving this balance between traditional value of relationships and social harmony and the modern business practice of individualism and competition can help organizations foster innovation and creativity while remaining culturally sensitive. First, we can harness the drive for individual achievement in a way that promotes harmony and unity instead of conformity. Dr. Bart, can you speak more about this approach?
Yeah, I can. And you know, with all of these that you're showing, where there's where we need to balance, you can either, you know, they can either create a conflict, or you can engineer them so that they complement each other. And I think, you know, our breakthrough approach is actually aimed at getting a powerful combination of both of these. And so we have a concept, for those of you that have worked with us that are listening out there, you'll recognize it. For those that haven't, this is it. We call it the line of one. And the line of one, you know, one of its key principles is that it's about complementarity. It's about working together. Oh, you're there. I'm ahead of you. Sorry about that. It's about unity, not uniformity. And I think that with this, even though we see individualism and competition as important, it can be done in a harmful way, or it can be done in a healthy way. And one of the things that we encourage and we teach is how to do this, how to actually have conflict in a healthy conflict within your organization, within your culture. We've got a new program called the Thriving Organization, which is really about building healthy healthy processes into your culture. And one of those is, as I mentioned before, healthy communication. But another one is, you know, healthy conflict, because conflict can release energy, but not if it's done in a way that creates pain and suffering, one that moves everybody on. A conflict that opens up things. Well, you see, one of the biggest enemies, as far as we're concerned, of business, the business world, is business as usual. Business as usual keeps you where you are. Business as usual if you're in business as usual, it allows your competition to get ahead of you. So, you know, business as usual that's built on people's egos and people's individual work. In other words, playing a game of I need to win at all costs, which might mean the cost of my team, the cost of my culture. That's no longer a winning proposition, not in today's world, not where we're building, because, you know, we're all involved in some old business practices, but actually the new business practices are coming from creating a global business culture. And many of you, even though you're out there in APAC, you will be confronted with this global business culture. And certainly young talent coming in will be much more adept at this. So this way of actually getting these principles to, well, harmony's there, to harmonize, to get the strength from both, and to actually have a healthy outcome in behaving this way in your workplace practices. That's really our goal.
Dr. Bart, can you speak or have you had experience working with companies where they have successfully found a way to make their employees feel valued as individuals at the same time as part of a collective?
Yeah, and I think that's actually the holy grail. And I can think of many of our clients that have evolved to do that. And we talked earlier about feedback. You know, feedback is a way of giving people not just coaching and where they need to shift and change and grow, but actually feedback is another way of acknowledging people. And you know, we have a value within our company we always which we actually share with our clients, which we call gossip success. And gossip success is really about team success and individual success. We encourage people to actually acknowledge and gossip success about other people in the organization and some of the successes that they've had, taking it away from the individual, putting it into the domain of the company and the team, but also acknowledging the individual.
Thank you, Dr. Bart. I'll move on to the last Confucian value that we're going to be discussing today, which is the importance of hard work. Now, the Confucian value of hard work has made a significant impact on modern-day business culture in Asia. One manifestation of this influence is the prevalence of long work hours and a high level of dedication to work, as exemplified by the 996 work culture in the China tech industry. Many of you may have heard of this. I know in the most recent 1 or 2 years, companies in China have started to move away from this. But prior to that, companies such as Alibaba, JD.com, or even Huawei have embraced this culture where employees work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. And such extensive work hours have also been observed in other Asian countries like South Korea and Japan, where employees frequently exceed 52 hours of work per week and 80 hours of overtime per month, respectively. Another aspect of the influence of Confucian value is the loyalty and commitment that employees show towards their employers or organizations. In Japan, there is an employment system which is called lifetime employment. And this is a prime example where employees remain with the company until retirement, emphasizing loyalty and commitment. So companies like Toyota, Honda, and Sony have historically placed great value on lifelong commitments from their employees. Now, in a rapidly evolving business landscape, especially in Asia, which is deemed by many companies as the source of rapid growth, there's a clash that arises between this traditional Confucian value of hard work and the emerging practice of work-life balance and career mobility. The Confucian value of hard work places great emphasis on relentless effort, perseverance. And as I mentioned earlier, hard work here is not just a means to success, but it feels like it's a moral duty. So individuals are driven to work tirelessly, pushing beyond their limits to achieve their goals. Loyalty to one's employer is also considered a supreme virtue. So employees are expected to prioritize the interests of their organization above their personal needs or desires. And last, personal success and reputation are tightly intertwined with modern workplace diligence in Confucian values. Being recognized and respected in a professional setting, it is seen as essential for personal fulfillment and actually social status. So personal achievements in the workplace carry a significant weight and contribute to one's overall reputation. In contrast, modern business practices prioritize work-life balance and career mobility. This approach recognizes the importance of personal well-being and emphasizes the need for a healthy balance between work and personal life. Enhancing personal growth and skills development are valued. Professionals seek diverse experiences, often changing roles to broaden their perspectives or acquire new skills. Here, flexibility in work schedules is also promoted, acknowledging that individuals have different needs and responsibilities outside of work. And this modern perspective recognizes that satisfaction and fulfillment should not solely come from work, but also from personal pursuits. So individuals are encouraged to pursue their passions, hobbies, and interests, finding a harmonious balance between the professional and personal fulfillment. To thrive in the dynamic business world here in APAC, individuals and organizations must navigate the clash between this Confucian value of hard work and the practices of work-life balance and career mobility. Now, we previously had a briefing led by our international team about this. And Bart, I wanted to ask you to share a little bit more about embracing flexible work and the findings from a study that was done about 4-day work week.
Yeah, so I think I'll talk about the principle. We probably don't have enough time to go through the findings, but we do have them for anybody that's interested. And I've just had a question actually on that. But let's just dial back a little bit. And you know, like I said, the world is changing, and one of the things about that is that with our approach, and if you like, the more recent approach to running a business and running a corporation in the global world, is that more and more leaders are realizing that it's really about outcomes rather than inputs. And we find when we work with clients, particularly new clients, a lot of them are wedded to a sort of an input mindset. And you know, historically, you just explained it. The input mindset is about how much work you've done, you know, how much time you've put in, whether you're actually in the workplace, in the office. And while that has been important in the past, what I think more enlightened leaders are seeing now is that it's not about that. It's about outcomes. And in one sense, it doesn't matter whether you're in the office or how much time you've worked. It's what's the outcome you've got. And if your outcome is to work hard and put lots of hours in, that is you know, that's valiant, but it might not be getting the outcomes of the business, and it might not be and it wouldn't be getting your outcomes over time. So I think it comes back to a mindset here of what are you really looking for? Are you looking for great outcomes, or are you focused on inputs? And that shift from input thinking to outcome thinking is a really powerful shift for individuals, for teams, and for organizations. In terms of work-life balance, I've always believed, because I know when I started Breakthrough, work-life balance became quite an important thing in those days, but people were looking to the company to provide that. And while that's very that's important, that the company certainly enables work-life balance, it doesn't have to provide it. I believe that work-life balance is a competency. It's something you have and you demonstrate, or it's something you need to learn and to demonstrate. And so I see work-life balance as just as important for the individual to become very competent at doing that. And we talked about decisions and making the decisions that are going to contribute to their work-life balance and their overall wellness, rather than having somebody else making decisions that take you in a different direction. And, you know, one thing we didn't talk about with decision making is courage. You need courage to make decisions. You need courage to make decisions that might go against the flow. And you certainly need courage to make decisions that might end up with you leaving the company you're working with because it's not providing you the sustenance and the ability and the support to create the work-life balance that you want.
Work-life balance is such a hot topic nowadays. Even here in Asia, there are a lot of companies now which are approaching organizations or business leaders, selling in, you know, well-being programs that you need to sign up for. And this is typically seen as a checkbox item by the leaders. But I love what you mentioned, Bart, that beyond the leaders themselves engaging into these kinds of support for their employees, it's actually a responsibility or a competency of the individual. And as we always say in our programs, you know, you always have to start with yourself.
Absolutely.
Now I'll move on to the summary. So we've talked about the clash, or how do we navigate a balance between our hierarchy and respect for authority with meritocracy and performance-based rewards. And the things that we mentioned, having a very strong communication framework that encourages feedback from across all levels of the organization will be key. We talked a lot about innovation, that innovation doesn't just come from the founders or the leaders. Actually, everyone, just like children, everyone can be creative, everyone can have a magical mindset, and we can foster this across the organization. And last but not the least, I know, Bart, you talked about the decision-making framework and spreading or delegating decision-making to your direct reports. But I also think one of the key things about this is just for leaders to embrace diversity in thinking. And it comes hand in hand with, you know, the decision framework or delegating decisions. We also talked about navigating the balance between relationships and social harmony. My favorite phrase of all, it's not about unity. It's about unity, not conformity. And Bart, you talked about our line of one tool or a line of one concept. And last but not the least, hard work versus work-life balance and career mobility. I will share more details in the briefing report that you all will receive after today about the 4-day work week findings. So we would encourage you to read about that and consider it for your own organization. But more importantly, it's really about equipping your employees on their own competency to improve overall well-being. Now we're moving on to the Q&A. We're opening it up for Q&A from the audience. And Parsha, is there any question that we can answer right now?
Yes, we do, Charibelle. But before we move forward, I want to thank you and I want to thank Dr. Bart Sayle. This has been actually very insightful and very interesting. And I think that culture is so integrated and it's so important for organizations to strike the right balance of the global culture, as Dr. Bart Sayle said, and their traditional culture. But yeah, moving on to questions and answers. The first question we have is, as an Asian business leader, how can you encourage employees from cultures that prioritize quietness and deference to provide feedback without coming across as pushy or overwhelming. So, Charibelle, I think this is for you.
Uh, I would just say, as a business leader, I think it's the first thing that you need to do is really creating an environment where people feel the people have psychological safety. So people feel comfortable expressing their thoughts and opinion. And how you do that is you have to set the tone yourself. As a business leader, you have to, in a very tact way, or in a very constructive way, using the feedback framework or using a very good communication framework, you can encourage your team members to share their feedback freely. So you yourself can also share feedback freely. What about you, Dr. Bart? Is anything that you want to add to that?
Well, that's a great answer. I mean, you start with yourself. So if you're a leader and this is what you want, then I think that the first thing is to declare that. So get your team and say what you would like from now on, and that, you know, and you're going to lead the way. And the other thing is don't expect too much too soon. So small steps, like I said, and really doing it in a way that's generous and with a lot of awareness of that people may feel uncomfortable to start with. But once they push past that discomfort and they see that this is the new regime, this is the new way of working, they'll love it. So, because otherwise it's just been ingrained in them. They've never questioned it. It's just been the way we're supposed to behave. But now here's a new way of doing it. And if you're in a, you know, a large organization, one of my beliefs with culture is that, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's my belief that somewhere in that large organization, there is part of your culture, there is actually what you want in the future for the whole organization. You need to find them. They're out there somewhere, behaving and believing and speaking and communicating and growing in the way you want. So find them, encourage them, showcase them, and let the culture move towards that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bart and Charibelle. Before we go to our next question, I just want to let everyone know that we will get back to you if we cannot answer your question in this session because of time limitation, but please be assured that we definitely will get back to you. So moving on to the next question, how can the process of achieving alignment be improved in today's corporate world, considering the long, arduous, and repetitive nature of the process?
I think this was like a question from someone undergoing 2024 planning, right? This very moment. It is the season for 2024 planning. So I can imagine a lot of our business leaders in the call are going into multiple meetings, doing a lot of alignment. Dr. Bart, is how I wanted to ask the question to you. How do you do this? If you have a line of one approach, so there's the line of one approach that you talked about earlier. How do you balance that with actually having to align many leaders with potentially different viewpoints?
Yeah, and well, we're good at this. And you can read our testimonials, because this is one of the things that we really are good at creating alignment where people believed you couldn't get alignment. And I think just a couple of things about alignment. The first thing is we talk about alignment, not agreement. And you'll find in a lot of organizations that don't have that distinction, that, you know, if you've got a leadership team, that they're holding out for agreement, and oh, well, they don't agree with me, and so on. You'll never get agreement, and not amongst a group of 12 people or so. You'll never get full agreement. So looking for that is a little bit of a what we would call a wild goose chase. But you can get alignment. And what alignment means is, look, I've got a slightly different endpoint. but I can see that by aligning to this, I'm going to move in the direction. And that's what we want. We want people aligned that are moving in the direction. You know, we've got a great video that's on, I think it's on YouTube, and we've adapted it. It's called Lessons from Geese, and that will give you a lot of principles. Geese are great at flying together. In fact, that's how they cover vast distances in the world, and they fly together, and they support each other, and by flying in a particular way close to each other in the same direction, they actually get uplift from each other. So that's a great model. So go look at that video. We'll post it out to people. But so alignment is about getting everybody into the same direction. And the way it's done really is, here's what you don't want. You don't want people saying alignment when actually they're not aligned, and they're not behaving aligned, and they leave the meeting. So many of you will have experienced this. I remember experiencing this a lot, where you're in a meeting and there's an important decision to be made about a direction you're going to take, and the leader says, okay, here's the decision that we need to make, and here's the decision that I think we should make. Who's for it? And maybe everybody's quiet, or a few people raise their hands, or whatever. And then eventually this decision is made in the meeting, and the meeting goes out, and people go back to their own teams and say, you'll never believe what decision they've made today. I wasn't really behind it, but that's the decision that's been made. And that's happened a lot in my experience. So that's the thing that we don't want. We want people to be truly aligned. And I think with that, when you're looking at a leadership team, each of those leaders has their own team. One of the things that I that I reinforce, or one of the things I tell leaders is that your leadership team is your number one team. It's not your own team that you go back to, even though a lot of behavior shows that that's probably what's happening. Your leadership team is your number one team, and that's the team that needs aligning, and then you can start to get the whole company aligned. But you say, how do we do it? We have a process for doing it, and you can't do it really without a process. So you need a good process of alignment. And alignment, it's a little bit like hygiene. You can do it once, but that doesn't mean to say that you're aligned forever. You don't take one shower and then you're clean forever. You need to take a shower every day to stay clean. And alignment is like that. You're going to fall out of alignment. You need to bring people back. You need to create that alignment again. So what do you align on? Well, you know, initially you align on your purpose and your vision. You know, that's your navigation, that's your destination. And once you've got people there, when people become misaligned, what you need to do is align them to the highest point again. Because, you know, there's some point, this might be difficult saying this or it might be difficult believing this in today's world, but maybe there's some point where everybody in the world is aligned. I don't know what that is at the moment, but, you know, you go to the highest level of alignment and then you work from that. Because when you get groups together, what they'll tend to do, the human psychology, is to look at our differences. We're built for that. We're wired for that, to look at differences. But the best way of alignment is to start with, well, where are we aligned? Yeah, like a Venn diagram. Where are we aligned? It might just be a little sliver of where we're aligned, but let's all stand in that place and then look at everything else around where we're not aligned and see how we can bring that back and build this alignment circle bigger and bigger and bigger.
Wow.
That was a very nice answer. And yes, alignment is like hygiene. It's like when you said that, I was like, that makes sense. That makes sense. So yeah, now we're gonna move on to the next question, and it says, In family-owned businesses in Asia, it can be challenging to navigate decision-making processes when the founder or head of the family is not open to hearing suggestions. With this in mind, what practical strategies or tips would you recommend to overcome this obstacle and create an environment where employees feel empowered to speak up and provide valuable suggestions for the progress and growth of the business, even in the face of resistance from the founder or the head of family? Dr. Bart, Charibelle is gonna go.
Do you want me to start with this?
Yes, please.
We've come across this a lot because one of our, if you like, one of our specialties is actually working with, we work with corporate companies and so on, but we've also got a specialty of working with privately owned companies, and usually there is an owner there, and it's really about coaching, and it's about being able to open that leader up to more self-awareness. It might be by coaching. They might resist that word even, but working with the leader, first of all, to get that leader to shift their awareness that actually there's a lot of value in allowing other people to have inputs and allowing other people. I mean, we've sort of covered it with the decision making. So, you know, if that leader doesn't get a shift in awareness, then it's going to be very difficult because they're going to get more and more resistant to this happening. So I think that's one thing. That's the shortest route to this, to actually be able to work with the leader or bring somebody in who can work with the leader to open them up and show them the value of shifting their particular style of management and leadership, and that it isn't a threat to them for that to happen. In fact, it's the opposite.
I'd like to add to that. I think one of the ways that I've seen this being done successfully in Asian companies is there is an established channel, almost like an anonymous communication, where employees are encouraged to provide feedback, give ideas through this anonymous communication channel. So it can be like a suggestion box or online feedback forums. And this helps employees share their input without fear or retribution from the founder walking straight into them and saying, hey, why did you say that? Or, you know, what idea was that? So leaders can consider this as creating channels for anonymous communication. But I know some companies also actually hire mediators or ombudsman who can serve sort of like a neutral party and advocate for employee concerns.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the next question. How do you politely enroll teams with multiple languages when a global organization is very English-speaking centric and does not know the local languages to help communication? Any tips?
Before we get to the tips, I was discussing this yesterday with a potential client, and we were sort of looking into the future, but I think that future is getting closer to us. That technology and AI will be solving this problem for us, I believe, in the future. So, you know, we run programs at the moment where we may have 100 people in that program, and there'll be several different languages. We run the program. We run the program in different languages. So we've got our program translated into about 14 different languages. Most of our lead facilitators currently are English, and in that situation we use simultaneous translation. But I was looking ahead, and I think it's not far out where we will run a program, and maybe the facilitator is speaking English, but everybody will have a headset or whatever, and it'll be simultaneously translated into their language. One thing that we've already built into our program is that the principles of the program can be communicated with an English speaking facilitator. He or she will be speaking in English, but then our overhead slides and so on, they can be in different languages as they're speaking that. And then a lot of our program is about people actually sharing insights and developing ideas in the audience, in groups, in twos, and so on. And people can use their natural language for that. And I think that's a tip for an organization like this, that keep the English stuff as much as possible to the essential, but then allow people to communicate in their own languages, and in how they then use that, get insights from it, and develop ideas. And then the other side of it is just acknowledging and honoring the fact that, you know, people aren't all English. You know, these low, you know, their own particular natural language that they were brought up with is just as important. It's when it sort of gets, you know, when it starts relating to power and so on, that things start to go wrong. And then we're back to, you know, what is the healthy organization?
Mm-hmm.
But I'll certainly have a think about that, and communicate out with some other ideas.
Bart, I think one thing to add to that is actually the importance of having a common language. And that's exactly why we talk about organizations, especially the big global organizations that have offices in Asia. It is highly critical for them to have a set of tools and concepts in English. But except the way we do it for APAC markets is the way we describe those tools and concepts, which become a common language, even though they are in English, the way you describe it and the examples that you use it are in the local language.
Yeah.
And that allows people to, when you hear that term, even though it's in English, because you are a global organization, which in this example is very much English speaking centrally, at least when they hear that term, they can translate it into their own context and language in their own hands. But that way you will still get everybody, you will still get that unity that we're talking about, not the conformity of language, but you will still get that unity.
Yeah. And I think we should add that you know, in Breakthrough APAC, with you leading that initiative, we've already got the strategy and the plans to train facilitators in these different languages that are out there. It's not going to be English.
Yes, definitely. But we will keep the tools and concepts in English.
So this is the last question we're gonna take, and it is, what do you notice are the biggest differences when working in a country like China and working in Europe or America in terms of how people respond to your program?
Right. Should I take that?
Yeah.
Well, I said earlier that the initial breakthrough program, which was designed within and for Unilever, that was already rolled out in several of the APAC countries, and it did very well. Now, when we formed the Breakthrough Global, like I said, we were one of the first that P&G China brought in from outside to work with their people, and I remember at that time that there was a lot of concern about doing our program in China, because the program really is about personal growth as well as business growth. And so we had to, all of our work had to be vetted by representatives of the People's Party in China before we were allowed to do it. And we had to agree that there would be representatives, political representatives at the back of the hall while we did the program. And they were all very nervous about it. P&G were, and so on. And I think what was great after the program, the political representatives were just as excited and interested, and came up asking me all sorts of questions. So that was a pass, and we didn't have to do that from then on. And but you know, there's this belief, and I don't know who's asked the question, but there is this belief that you know, there would be a difference, and there are differences, but I think those differences are superficial, because what breakthrough is about, really, what the tools are about being human. And that and we're all at that human level, and that human level of being able to make our own choices, and then find ways to actualize those choices for ourselves, for our businesses, for our teams. Ultimately, that's a human thing. It's not an ethnic thing. And I think that what happens is that my belief here, again, it's my belief. If we think about culture and culture mapping and so on, that we're all born into a culture. It's, you know, that culture's already there, and we're born into it. It's like going out into the rain. All of a sudden, there's this culture that we're wrapped up in, and we get socialized through our families and so on. And so we build up that local, let's call it the local culture, your ethnic culture, your local culture. And that's one layer. And then as we progress, and particularly I'm talking about business here, with that birthright culture, we then overlay other cultures. So if we're working in business, there's then the business culture that's overlaid on that. Now, if you're in a company that isn't global and is just local, or, you know, just works in one country, that might be as far as you go. But then if you're working in an organization, actually any organization these days, because all the communication routes are open, then on top of that is this global culture that I'm talking about. Actually, no, on top of that may then be, I've seen this actually, I saw this in Vietnam, that there was the Vietnamese culture, and then there was like the Vietnamese business culture, or it was actually Chinese business culture. And then on top of that was the Western business culture, because it was it was a subsidiary of an American organization. So I saw those three cultures operating. I mean, it's interesting. If you attune to it, you can see these three cultures, and they're like layers. Now, so, you know, some of them take more power than others. So some of the older members in that group at the time, they were much more wedded to the Vietnamese culture or Chinese culture. But the younger ones, they were much more adept and much more flexible to take on the Western business culture. And I think that you know, there were teething problems with that. And that's where you get, like the last question, when it was that American Western business culture, sometimes it was insensitive to the local cultures. And that's where you saw it. That's where you saw the clash. That's where you saw the conflicts. That's where people went quiet rather than speaking out. But I think we've got another culture on top of that now, which is the global culture. And the global culture is more than just business. It's run by Netflix. It's run by TikTok. It's run because everybody has access to those. So that whole area, we can't just talk about business culture now. We've got this global culture that's and you know, it's got some positives, but it's got some things that maybe we don't want, where it basically overtakes and subsumes some of those real valuable riches of the local cultures, but that's where we're living. They're the cultures, they're the clashes that we've got. And I think the way to navigate through them is to make them work, to move them from a clash to something that can be complementary.
Wow, Dr. Bart, I think unfortunately we don't have all of the time today to discuss that, but I'm sure a lot of our business leaders in the call are actually wanting to speak more about this, respecting the local culture while making sure that the company is also acknowledging and embracing global culture that you're talking about, so that there's a synergy between tradition and innovation, between tradition and progress. Now, as we end the briefing today, I wanted to share with everyone that we are offering a gift to you. Again, as part of Confucian value, business gifts are very important to maintain social harmony. So we are offering a business gift to your business. Let us know what your specific situation is, and we can get into an hour consultation. You can reach out to us at partnerships@breakthroughglobal.com, and we can schedule a discussion with you about your specific situation, about the topic that we talked about today, a potential clash with what you're seeing between local nuances versus driving your organization into growth, or any other topic that you'd like us to give inputs on. And with that said, I'd like to thank everybody today for calling in. Thank you for spending the past hour and a half with us. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next briefing. And look out in your email inbox for the report that we will be sharing with everyone today. Thank you.
Yes, and I'd just like to say thanks so much. Thanks for staying with us. It's been great, actually, to reach out and connect. That's all about, I mean, our whole talk is really about, beneath it is about connection. And so we really value your feedback, any insights you've got, please send them to us. And we look forward to that. And in the meantime, I don't wish you luck, I wish you success with your leadership, with your organization, with your growth as a leader, and with your personal growth. Thank you.